What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're doing the review of the Inov-8 F-Lite G300s. Alright, so if you guys missed my unboxing of the G300s that I did sometime in the middle of December, I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can check that out before you watch this video. Long story short, Inov-8 sent me one of 16 packages. They're athlete packages for the G300. I received number 11. So huge shout out to Inov-8 for sending me that. That was one of the coolest things that anyone's ever sent me. Definitely one of the cooler shoe unboxings that I've ever done. But when I did that video, I was in the mindset that these were gonna be like CrossFit shoes. And the more and more that I use them, the more I realized that they're probably a little bit less like their 235s, even their like 260s, more of their sport or fitness style shoes rather than just a normal pair of like training shoes or overall training shoes, kind of like their all-train shoes. I believe it's like the all-train 240 right now before I did the review of the all-train 215s. And I mean, just looking at the shoe, they kind of look more similar to that style shoe. So there's a few different materials on the upper. There's an engineered knit fabric, and then there's like a ripstop material at the back heel area of the shoe, and then there is a TPU like midfoot cage, and then there is the 360 rope tech guard that pretty much extends throughout the outsole, and it's kind of like a carrier for the midsole foam. So the knit material is an engineered kind of knit material. It has a little bit of stretch to it in certain areas, like the top of the toe box has a little bit of stretch. And then anywhere that you see this black, just solid black, is going to be a part that does not have as much stretch. But for the most part, the upper material is a engineered stretchy kind of fabric. And then there is no tongue, it's just a sock-like fit here. Like I said, the heel area has a little bit more structure to it. It does not have like an external heel collar or counter that is pretty common nowadays, but there's a pretty good heel cup there. And then also the midsole rises up to cup your heel. It actually goes up a pretty fair amount. And then there's no heel slip or anything with this shoe. The fit around the ankle and heel itself is pretty good. Though if you did have issues with like things rubbing into your Achilles, the back part of the shoe does rise up quite a bit. So that could be an issue, but it wasn't an issue for me. Going to the TPU cage in the midfoot, that's where the laces go through. I actually really do like the laces. They're nice, beefy, padded, and they do stay tied and they look cool. The one thing that I do not like about this midfoot cage is on the inside part of the cage at the very top here, this part presses up against my foot. It doesn't hurt, it just gets really annoying. So I end up wearing my shoes a little bit loose, and that's not a good solution for that either. I wish that they could do away with this part right here, or if they can make it a little bit thinner, or maybe even add a little bit more reinforcement to the inside part of the shoe. It just kind of bugs after a long time, after extended periods of wear, and there's nothing that I have figured out to really mitigate the problem. So the 360 rope guard goes pretty much all around the shoe. It doesn't go really over the heel part of the midsole. I think the whole outsole is that rubber material, because on the edges of the outsole right here where there's like kind of black, it's like rubbed away and it's showing some of the gum material. So my guess is that 360 rope tech guard is actually just the outsole itself. And in my testing, I felt that it was very good. It does take a little bit to break in. The graphene, just like in the 290 that I reviewed, was a little bit slippery at first, but as you wear it down, it becomes a lot more grippy. And I never had any issues with grip with this shoe other than like the first couple days. You do have the Metaflex grooves at the toe box. That's something that you would come to know and love from Inov-8 shoes. It makes it so the forefoot kind of expands when you hit the ground, and then it's very flexible in the toe box of the shoe. There is no external midfoot shank, but if you were to bend the shoe, there's definitely a good amount of resistance in the middle part of the shoe. So you do have that 360 rope type guard, which is the carrier per se for the actual midsole foam. So anywhere you see that black midsole, that's just the normal midsole material. This is one of the taller Inov-8 shoes, coming in at 14 millimeters at the heel of the shoe, and then it goes down to 8 millimeters at the toe. It looks a lot taller than it is, but it also does feel taller than any of the other previous Inov-8 shoes, like the 260s, which are supposed to have that same 8 millimeter drop. The 300s feel much taller in comparison. If you have both of these shoes on, you would notice it right away. So I am not sure that's like more of like a perceived height. It might be that 14 millimeters, but it definitely feels like a much taller shoe than anything else that Inov-8's ever put out. So when you go to size your G300s, I'm going to say go with your normal training shoe size. I got these in a size 10. The length of them is perfect for me. The toe box is very wide in these shoes. This in Inov-8's fit scale is a 5, which is their widest fit. It's for sure wider than the 235s, which are also a 5 on their fit scale. The only issue that, like I said before, ran into a problem with is in that middle part of the shoe with the TPU cage. I'm gonna say if you have wide feet, you're probably gonna hate this shoe, because that is definitely going to press up on the instep of your foot. I do not have wide feet by any means, maybe a little bit in the metatarsal area, but definitely not in the midfoot, and that causes me that issue of rubbing. Like I said, it's not painful, it's just kind of annoying. Other than that, I think the shoe fits pretty good as far as length goes. It's true to size in that respect, but just keep in mind that when you buy these shoes, make sure that you buy them from somebody that has a fairly easy return policy, so that you know whether or not you can deal with that cage pressing up against the instep of your foot. So when you start adding more materials to a shoe, you usually start detracting from the overall like flexibility of that shoe, and that's exactly the case with the G300s. This is definitely not the most flexible Inov-8 shoe, but it's not that bad either. It's still one of the better training shoes in general. It's just a little bit more stiff and clunky for an Inov-8 shoe, and that's because of the 360 rope type guard, which does actually flex a pretty good amount in the toe area of the shoe, but the middle foot of the shoe is not that flexible, and that paired with like the sharp edges of the outsole and the higher sidewalls, it makes for a slightly more rigid feel and a slightly more clunky shoe overall. It's very similar to what Nike has been doing with the Metcon series shoes over the course of the past 5 years. That being said, I did not actually hate running in these shoes. I actually thought running in these shoes was pretty good. There's a good amount of heel cushioning here, and it actually almost feels like these shoes make you heel strike. So typically I am a midfoot striker. I usually touch down on the outside part of my foot. If you could tell, there is a good amount of wear on that outside part of the shoe. But these shoes will actually kind of push you to do that heel strike. And that's, I think, the way that these shoes are intended to be ran in. The transition is actually fairly smooth from heel to toe when you're running. And I didn't really actually feel like running was bad in these shoes. It's just a little bit more clunky. Definitely not as good as like a running shoe, but better than both Nanos and Metcons. So I can't really complain as far as running goes. When it came to like plyometric movements, like burpees, double unders, box jumps, I really had no issues, no complaints or anything. There is that little bit of space in the toe box that caused my toes to kind of move around a little bit more than I'd like when doing burpees, but I never found it to be that detrimental when I'm doing my workouts. Double under tracking was fine in these shoes, and then box jump rebounding was excellent as well. I think the midsole is very responsive in these, and it's also cushioned enough so that your feet don't become too uncomfortable. Though there is a little bit of a break-in time for the rubber of the 360 rope guard. Initially it's going to be fairly stiff, but it does break in well over time and will be more comfortable as you wear these shoes in. The design of these shoes screams stability. Like I mentioned earlier, the outsole has those very pronounced edges. When you have these shoes, you feel planted onto the ground. If you were to turn your feet over, there's really no rollover. Lateral support in these shoes is excellent. The 360 rope tech adds in another layer of structure to the shoe. It does rise up quite a bit, cups your foot in place. The midfoot cage also does a good job in securing your foot in the midfoot of the shoe. The heel area is very wide, gives you a lot of contact area with the ground. The actual profile of the shoe is a little bit thinner, and then the heel kind of stretches out and gives you that extended contact area. And then there are some like little outriggers on the 360 rope tech guard. Like I said, it does extend out quite a bit. And the midsole, while being cushioned, is also very responsive in these shoes. I thought these shoes were excellent for lunging movements because the lateral stability is so good on these shoes. You never really feel like you're gonna tip over side to side. So unilateral stuff is excellent in the G300s. They also were very good for doing wall balls. The extended heel height there will for sure help you out in those longer sets of wall balls. It'll make it so that you don't have to squat down quite so far. So I did appreciate that with the G300s. Plus, like I said, they are very responsive. At least the midsole is very responsive on these shoes. When it came to movements where I could get planted and set myself up, I thought the G300s were excellent. I did a max back squat in these, hit 405. Hadn't squatted in like maybe 3 months, and I was still able to hit that number in my G300s. I never really doubted these shoes or doubted that I would not be able to hit something like that in them. I thought doing cleans in these shoes was excellent, both power cleans and squat cleans. I managed to hit a 255 triple squat clean with these shoes on, no issues there. I never really felt like I was too forward or anything, but I did notice that I was having issues snatching in these shoes, having weight overhead. I did notice that my feet were prone to sliding forward, and then the toe box is quite wide, so my feet would kind of go all over the place inside of these shoes as well. Even if I were to secure the midfoot even more than I typically do, I still always ran into issues when I was snatching weight in these or putting any kind of weight overhead. I had that same issue with devil's presses, bringing the weight up and then bringing it down. I always felt like the dumbbells were pulling me forward in these shoes. Doing deadlifts in these was not awful because you could get a little bit more planted, but the heel height and the stack height, the drop, is not ideal for deadlifting. Though if that was a movement that you wanted to do, I'd say these aren't awful for it. You could definitely do them, but they're not going to be my first pick for doing deadlifts, and I for sure would never try to do a max out deadlift in these. So the grip is excellent on these shoes when doing rope climbs. Doesn't look like there's any premature wear or anything on the shoe. And the best part about these, I think, is coming down the rope. They just slide down the rope. They don't fall off your feet or anything. Definitely one of the better rope climb shoes. Probably the best in all of Inov-8's lineup. So the G300s retail for $150. So it puts them a little bit more at the premium end of the training shoe spectrum. The only things that are in that pricing category are the RF1s and then the Metcon Reacts. Personally, I thought the G300s were a good training shoe, probably better suited for just like overall training. If you're not looking for a shoe to max out in or anything, I think the G300s would be excellent. They're a good WOD shoe. They're a pretty decent running shoe. You can do pretty much anything in the training spectrum in them, but there are certain things that make them not the best for like the sport of fitness or CrossFit, and that's mainly that I thought the drop is a little too steep. I feel like these are a little bit too high and disconnected from the ground. The heel or stack height in general makes them just a little bit less responsive than something like the 235 V3s, which are still an excellent shoe. And even compared to the 260s, which I thought were excellent as well, and have that higher stack height, have that 8mm drop, I felt like the G300s were just a little bit too tall, a little bit too disconnected. But that is if you had CrossFit in mind. If you're looking for just like an overall, just general training shoe, I think the G300s are a very good shoe. They are a little bit more on the expensive side, but if you don't mind paying that extra bit, I think the G300s are an excellent pick. Just make sure that you do buy them from somewhere that has an easy return policy, because I don't know how many people are going to be able to live with the cage pressing up on the instep of their foot. That is probably, in my opinion, the biggest detractor from me recommending this shoe wholeheartedly. Overall though, I do like the technology that Inov-8 put in the G300s. I think that they really do an awesome job in actually trying to innovate and not just kind of making safe designs or anything. Sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I don't think it panned out completely, but I do appreciate the G300s for what they are as a just general training shoe. If you guys have any questions about the Inov-8 G300s, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching. And make sure that you guys check out the full in-depth written review for the G300s. You'll find that on my website, as many reviews as possible.com.